If you've looked in your discernment booklet, what is one half of your discernment booklet? Bylaws, exactly. Bylaws. A few people get excited about bylaws. I happen to be one of those. Most people don't, but they are very important legal documents that help structure how we make decisions and who gets to make what kinds of decisions. So I'm going to just give you a very, very quick overview about what we have in the bylaws here tonight. Some people say bylaws should be updated about every 5 years. It's 13 years since we last updated our bylaws. And the changes that are in these bylaws, there's a few new things in there, but mostly they're about putting in paper on words what we are actually doing in practice and how our practices have changed. Some of it is also to make it fit better within the legal requirements that we currently have within Ontario. The first 4 pages in your discernment booklet are actually a summary of the changes in the bylaws. So if you don't want to read the whole of the bylaws, you could read just those 4 pages. And I'm here to suggest to you that there are quite a few sort of changes that you might call new or whatever, but I would say that the only place where there is substantive difference in terms of how we're talking about how we do things is Section 5. That is the section on membership. It reflects current practices. It talks about some things that we didn't talk about before and makes it more clear. So for those of you who are still looking for bedtime reading tonight and coming back for delegate session tomorrow, you could read all of it, or you could read the summary on the 4 pages, or you could read just Section 5, so you know what it says for the bylaws. I did also want to say that we hosted 3 sessions over the last few weeks when people could meet to talk about the bylaws, because there are a few other people like me who like to talk about bylaws. And about 10 people took advantage of those sessions, which is great. If there are any further questions or suggestions that people have about the bylaws, I suggest that you see me or David or Ernie Harris, who is our bylaw geek on the Executive Council, because we're not going to be accepting any amendments from the floor when we discuss the bylaws on Saturday afternoon. So if you have any amendments or specific things that really worry you about the bylaws, please talk to one of us tonight, during the break tomorrow morning, before tomorrow morning. If you have an amendment to suggest, write it out and give it to us before lunch tomorrow, so that then we can deal with it and have it ready to present. And when we discuss the bylaws in the afternoon tomorrow, there will be time for questions of clarification. There will be time for you to express opinions or perspectives that you might have, but we will not be accepting amendments from the floor on Saturday afternoon. So feel free to talk to us at all your spare time between now and then. Or some of us have already sent some suggestions to us already, which is great. Strong, healthy organizational structures support what we do together as congregations. This year, we're bringing to you a refreshed and updated bylaw so that you can be sure that we have a solid community framework that supports and serves our mission together. When fully 1/2 of the discernment document is just the bylaws, then you know how important these are. They provide the legal framework for how we operate, largely around how we make decisions and who can make which kinds of decisions. The first 4 pages of the bylaws describe the rationale and the changes in the bylaws. It's suggested that bylaws ought to be updated about every 5 years, and it's 13 years since we last made revisions to our bylaws. The changes in these bylaws reflect largely the changes in practice that have been taking place over the years, as well as some clearer ways of presenting it, and including some new legal things that are required. So I'm just going to give a very short overview, section by section. It's on page B2, I think it's called, on the beginning part of the bylaws part of your discernment document. Section 1 is the definition of terms, and this is new to the bylaws. We've not done this before, but it helps to be clear that we're all using the same language and understanding what it's about. Section 2 references the confession of faith as being the common understandings that guide the faith and practice of the Mennonite Church, and that is unchanged from before. Section 3 includes reference to our church polity, or church, how ministers do things within the church, a shared understanding, a polity manual. That has always been there, but we have not referenced it in the bylaws before, so it is new to be included. Section 4 is about our purposes as a charitable organization, as a church. These are unchanged, and that is largely because for legal reasons, it's very difficult to change your purposes. Once you change your purposes, you have to change all kinds of other things legally, and so the legal advice is to use exactly the same wording that was used when we created the purposes, however many years that was, 40 years or whatever years ago. So there are some things about how we understand our call to mission that might be a little different, and we can put those into other documents. But the purposes in the bylaws remain the same legal ones that were approved by the government. Section 5 is the section on membership that has had the most changes. It's reflecting current practice, and it's being more clear that congregations are members of MCEC. The previous one talked about congregations as members and then individuals as delegates, and then you're not sure, are the individual delegates the members, or who are the members of MCEC? This is being very clear that the members of MCEC are the congregations, and the congregations send the delegates then to be part of making the decisions. It also talks about provisional membership, which is emerging churches that we have not listed as explicitly as this before. And section 6 is about churches that are just beginning in their relationship with MCEC. That is a new section, but it is then also part of talking about how we encourage and develop the relationship with congregations in MCEC. Section 7 is on delegate gatherings. That's largely the same, as is section 8, which is about delegate gatherings. Sections 9 to 16 is really all about the Executive Council and the officers. It's largely the same, with a few additional things such as naming and declaring conflict of interest, so that we're more aware of those things in today's world. Section 17 is a new one that is required by law as protection of directors from and others. Sections 18, 19, and 20 are basically the same in terms of some of the ways that we work at things. And section 21 is the new part that's been added. It's considered best practice in the charitable world. That one always includes what happens in case the organization falls apart and doesn't continue. What happens to the assets? Where does it go? And so we've named here that the assets, it would clarified on how the remaining assets would be dispersed in the case of something that we can hardly even imagine. But that's part of what bylaws do, is they help us address cases that we could hardly ever imagine even happening, and so that's what's included there. These draft bylaws were approved by the Executive Council to be presented to you today. The Executive Council reviewed them with a lot of help from Ernie Harris, our bylaw geek, and they've been reviewed and edited by our legal counsel as well. They've been available on our website for more than the last month that is required. And then we hosted 3 sessions over the last few weeks when people could meet to talk about them in more detail if they had questions or if they just wanted to learn more about the bylaws. We believe that these bylaws provide a solid framework for how we operate together as a church community. Who is a member? Who can make decisions? What kinds of decisions those people can make? It's a process document more than anything else. It helps to ensure good processes in good times and especially good processes in difficult times. But in the end, it's our relationships with each other, and it's the movement of the Holy Spirit in our midst. Those are the things that hold us together and keep us accountable to each other. These bylaws are just tools to facilitate those relationships, but it's the Spirit that gives life to our faith community. Now it's time to move back to those bylaws. As we said earlier, our ministry together is served by having a strong organizational structure to support our mission. And that's why the Executive Council is bringing this refreshed bylaw to you for your approval. We have received one amendment to the bylaws. It's a wording change. It's not a content change. It's a wording change to try and help make it more clear about what the intent is. If you want to see it, you can turn to page B9 in your booklet to see what the original is. On the screen is what we are proposing as the amendment to what is printed there, and then this is what we will be presenting to you for the bylaws to be approved. So under 5.9, withdrawal from membership, the first point is in the case of a provisional congregation, and then 3 points below that. And the second point is in the case of a full member congregation, and then 2 points below that. And it just says the same thing as what it said in the other draft, but instead of mixing up the ideas between the 2 points, it makes it more clear as to what is the procedure for a provisional congregation and what is the procedure for a full member congregation. So we present that amendment to you along with the bylaws that you have. What I'm going to do is read the motion for the bylaws. It can be found on page B4 in your packets. It's a very legal motion, so it has a lot of whereases. I'm going to read the whereases, and they're in your booklet, but we're going to have only the actual motion up on the screen. So I will read that motion and make the motion, and then I will be looking for a seconder for that motion. We will then follow with questions or comments from the floor, of which no more amendments, but there can be comments or questions at that point in time, and then we will take a vote on the bylaws. So that's the procedure we're going to follow. So let me begin by reading the whole motion, all the whereases. Whereas Mennonite Church Eastern Canada desires to have a bylaw that serves the mission of MCEC, which is dedicated to actively support God's mission in the world and the congregations of MCEC. And whereas MCEC, for the purposes of greater clarity and due to the numerous amendments to the existing general operating bylaw, being bylaw number 3, and whereas the revised bylaw number 4 has been reviewed in its entirety and with opportunity for amendment, including this one amendment I just made, by delegates to the 2019 MCEC Annual Church Gathering, be it resolved that the Corporation of MCEC shall now adopt a new general operating bylaw, being bylaw number 4, which replaces in entirety the existing general operating bylaw number 3. I make that motion. And is there a seconder to support that motion? Victor Clausen from Sterling Church. Thank you. All right, let's open up the floor for questions and comments from the floor. We have a microphone here and a microphone here. And see if we can answer any questions of clarification, or if you have a comment or an opinion or perspective about what you really like about the bylaw or a concern that you have about it, please come share it with the rest of us.
It's Marcus Shantz again from Conrad Grebel University College. I'm not seeking attention or anything. I just have a comment. I'm not proposing an amendment. I'm not entitled to, because I'm not a delegate. For future consideration, for future work, I'd love to see consideration of an addition to the definitions section in section 1, that would define what a partner ministry is and what partners do for MCEC, similar to the definition of a congregation that's in there. By my count, the proposed bylaws reference partners twice, referring to them as partner organizations or partner agencies, lowercase. And I'm suggesting maybe one day we could have partner ministries, uppercase. And the reason is that I don't think we have language that captures what's in the relationship. MCEC appoints many representatives to the boards of partner ministries and also provides significant funding to partners. So given that significant involvement, I think it would be worth and perhaps a healthy exercise to try and find some language around that. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. We will take note of that, and maybe it won't be 13 years till the next bylaw, but we'll work on that. Another comment or question? No one's rushing. I think that means then that we're ready to call a question and move to the vote. So would all the delegates who are in a favor of moving this motion please raise your hand? Thank you. And are there any opposed? There are none, and so it's carried. Thank you very much. There's a second part to this legal stuff around the bylaws. And this is partly because we were advised by our legal counsel not to change our purposes, but then we were also advised by legal counsel that we need to broaden our priorities a little bit to make space for the kind of work that we've been doing or the way that we've been working, particularly in Toronto, in terms of renting our building facilities at a reduced rate. And that's not usually within the purposes of a church, and so it's expanding our priorities a little bit. And so on that recommendation, on the very last page of your discernment document, on page B26, there is a motion that helps us to think about, it helps us to go on record that we affirm that at some times MCEC will rent out property it owns or leases at less than market value to other charitable organizations as approved by the Executive Council. So this motion simply puts it onto the record that this is one of our ministry priorities, and we can do that without changing our purposes in the bylaws. So I'm going to read the motion. Again, it's long and legal, and you can read it in your document on page B26. I will read the motion, ask for a seconder to support the motion, then we'll see if there's any further questions before calling the question. Whereas MCEC seeks to be a church that supports God's purposes in the world, be it resolved that in addition to the purposes expressed in the bylaw governing MCEC, that MCEC also adopts as one of its primary mission priorities the sharing of MCEC-owned or leased properties with other charitable organizations at nominal cost, provided that the mission of such charitable organizations is deemed to be compatible with that of MCEC. Decisions to support the efficient and cost-effective operation of such minded charitable organizations shall be made at the discretion of the Executive Council. Is there a seconder to support that motion? Back there, let's invite our woman to be able to support that. Thank you. And are there any questions or comments about this motion before we move to calling the question? All right, it looks like we're at peace in terms of understanding the question. So would those of you who are in favor of approving this motion please raise your hand? All right, thank you. And are there any opposed? And there are not, and that motion is carried as well.